So have you ever heard of a concept called redintegration? This is something I've been playing around with, and I've been looking for a lot of research on it, just in terms of how it relates and if people have framed, coping mechanisms and maladaptive repetitive behaviors in this way. So, very simple definition, it's a restoration of a former state. And as I've been exploring my coping mechanisms and my kind of maladaptive tendencies, my repetitive behaviors, some call them addictions, how are they able to kind of re-trigger, re-traumatize, whatever those coping mechanisms I'm employing, whatever I'm trying to avoid, right? So if it's, I'm uncomfortable with negative emotions, whether it be sadness, anger, fear, and if I lean on substance, or if I throw myself into work or exercise, this concept for me, do those coping mechanisms act to redintegrate, to restore that thing that I'm actually employing them to avoid? And I think it's interesting, especially for men who lean on substance or throw ourselves into work, exercise, hobby, these these, not good or bad, like these things can all be great and joyful, but if we approach them in a way because we want to avoid uncomfortable feelings and emotions, right? This is a more of an external versus employing more productive tools that are more internal, whether it's mindfulness, connecting with friends and family, healthy forms of exercise, healthy interactions, being of service. And I think I think if we're on a journey where we want to improve how we feel on a daily basis, how we show up in the world for ourselves and for our family, I think looking at some of our repetitive behaviors and quite honestly kind of putting them on the chopping block and recognizing, I might need to put something down. I might need to switch something out. Whether that's, losing hundreds of hours a month, whether it's video games, television, if we're using these things to hide from emotions we don't want to feel, which I think is a real common, masculine trait, at least with the hundreds of men I've sat with in men's groups, men's retreat weekends, plant medicine weekends, group therapy, 12-step work. We tend to lean away from emotions we don't want to feel, and we employ something in its, as a way to avoid that. Some can be construed as addictive, behaviors, coping mechanisms. I have a blanket concept. It's just, they're avoidant behaviors, right? We're avoiding something, right? Like in 12-step work, they talk a lot about the substance that we need to stay away from, whether it be calories, sugar, sex. There's a 12-step for everything. Alcohol, drugs, narcotics. They talk a lot about the substance. They don't talk about the thirst, right? What's the pain driving that? So whether it be trauma, early, developmental trauma, or just our inability to sit with negative emotions and say, hey, okay, these are emotions. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling fear. And I think, that kind of ties into a couple of really smart guys who said things like, Nikola Tesla was attributed to saying, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, right? So if I'm leaning on substance in order to avoid emotions or avoid situations or avoid people or not connect with people or not connect with my anger or my fear, that avoidant behavior is going to be probably a low frequency, a low energy, a low vibration. So flipping those and having a solution that's more high vibe or a different frequency is going to help me to kind of redirect that energy towards more positive outcome, more positive activities. Also, like, Einstein said, he said something to the effect of, we can't solve our problems at the same level of thinking that created them. And I've kind of taken the liberty to understand that to be, our problems can't be solved at the level of consciousness, right? So if we're coming from a place of separation, we're not coming, it's not going to be solved from a place of separation. The opposite of that would be connection. So, if we're coming from a kind of a place of fear or anger, it's going to be the inverse. It's going to be love, compassion, empathy, gratitude, understanding. That's going to be where the solution lives. And so I think, when I think about a lot of the men I know that are working through coping mechanisms, you think of people that are in 12-step because at some point a substance, in AA it's alcohol, cannabis, narcotics, prescription, whatever, hardcore street drugs, whatever, like at some point our engagement with those things began to have negative impact on our lives, right? On our relationships, on our ability to function, whether it's work, family, social responsibilities, parental responsibilities. And so those that are drawn to that place, whether it's somewhere in 12-step, they're looking to put themselves in a place where other people want to avoid the same thing. Other people are in the process of developing successful ways to avoid those things. I think of people that go to therapy, go to couples therapy. There's a scenario going on that they want to change, and we recognize that there are ways that we can learn. And it's really, I think at the end of the day, it's really about kind of rewiring these neural pathways from these avoidant behaviors to ones of more of acceptance. And obviously there are tons of tools, mindful tools, gratitudes, journaling, breath work, meditation, exercise, connection. And I think this concept of redintegration, because for me, the way it seems, at least with some of my repetitive behaviors, when I do engage in them, they tend to kind of almost like re-traumatize or reinforce that thing I'm actually trying to avoid. So whatever that, I think that the overarching meaning for me and how I kind of put all of these kind of different things together is if we can start to look in the mirror and recognize what are some of the repetitive behaviors I engage in that could be construed as coping mechanisms. What are some of those things that I'm actually trying to avoid, whether it be connection, stress, anger, emotions like anger, fear, sadness. And if I'm doing that in a way that it's almost like they can compound, they can restore that former state. So it's like maybe as a child, I picked up ways to avoid things I didn't understand and didn't want to experience. But then as an adult, it's a way to almost re-traumatize and relive that experience. And you think of, people that are having a challenging time right now. They're unhoused. They're, mental health issues have, and there could be substance. There could be this. Well, that can, it would be easy for an armchair, psychiatrist or for somebody just observing the world to recognize, wow, like that trauma is, that negative state is kind of redintegrated into their experience now, whether there was a predisposition to a mental health issue or it was a sequence of unfortunate events that led us to wherever we are. This concept of redintegration, I think, is important in so much as if we're in a place where we want to look in and change how we experience the world, how we experience the present moment. We want to have more wins. We want to be able to take gracefully the losses. I think we need to put on the chopping block. What are those? I call them kind of the usual suspects. I think for a lot of men, it can be leaning on substance to the point of addiction. It can be throwing ourselves into work, exercise. And when those behaviors, not good or bad, but when those behaviors start to have negative consequences with our relationships or our physical health or our emotional health, then I think they kind of get into that category of those avoidant behaviors, those repetitive behaviors that can be seen through the lens of addiction, that can be seen as having negative impact. Well, so we're in charge of that, right? We have, there are sets of tools, whether we want to go towards a therapeutic route, a 12-step route, plant medicine. Men's group is great because, God, you get to sit with a group of men that are having the same fucking issues, just different. It's a different cast of characters, but everybody's dealing with the same shit. I think it's really good for us to be able to spotlight and then share those things that are successful. How I was able to, in physics, they say like the universe abhors a vacuum. Like if something is taken out, the universe is going to replace it with something. So if we can kind of look at these, a lot of guys I know that are putting down substance, they're picking up mindfulness, they're picking up daily exercise, because, if you've taken something out of your life, if you can proactively put something back in, then, the universe, it's like you stop being a workaholic, you start coming home more, but then you throw yourself into hobbies and other things that take you away from family, that take you away from the present moment. That kind of shell game is easy. People that put down, alcohol and pick up cannabis. People that, there's a shell game if we're not proactive about what we're going to take out of our life and what we're going to put back in it. And I just think this concept of redintegration is interesting. I've been looking for literature around calling our coping mechanisms redintegrations, like calling these coping mechanisms ways to re-traumatize ourselves, or to experience, like if we're trying to avoid shame or guilt or fear, anger, sadness, how our repetitive behaviors still do it just in a different way. And I really can't find much about it, so it's just kind of a shot in the dark, but I think it can be a helpful tool when we're ready to make some positive changes, to be able to then kind of get a microscope and look at our repetitive behaviors. What are the things we engage in that are avoidant behaviors? Are we avoiding connection with others? Are we avoiding negative emotions that we can get help with, in dealing with? But this has been a tool that I've shared and that I've used, that I think it's a definition that definitely deserves some exploring.